All right, everybody, we will get started because it's right on 2:15. Welcome to SAME's Small Business Conference. Happy Halloween. Hope you're having a good one. So welcome to our session on strategies that promote corporate growth and expansion. You guys are in for quite a treat today. I'll avoid the Halloween pun there. So I am your moderator. My name is Catherine Niles. I work for Global Engineering Solutions, which is a small woman-owned engineering program management and construction management firm. I will be your moderator, and I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. But before I do, I have a couple administrative things that we can just get out of the way. And the first one is please take note of the emergency exits. You guys walked a long way to get here, so hopefully it's a shorter walk out because we have some stairs right across the way. The other thing is please silence your cell phones. Also, thank you to our sponsors. This is a great event, so sponsors make that possible. Another thing is you can earn a PDH credit. Once you're scanned to get into this room, it's kind of automatically generated, but there is also a form in the back of your conference brochure if you wanted to self-report and submit it that way. Also, these sessions are all going to be put online, or I'm sorry, the presentations are all going to be put online on SAME SBC's website about next week. And on that note, this session is actually being recorded, so that's why we ask for you to silence your cell phones. It's also why when question and answers come up, we're going to ask that you wait until you're handed a mic, you give your name, your firm, and you ask your question kind of slowly and clearly into the mic so that we can catch it for the audio recording, because you will be able to go back and watch those recordings. And if we don't catch the question, then the answer never seems as relevant, if you will. So with no more ado, let me introduce our speaker today, and that is Alex King of Reliant Global. Alex is the Vice President of Business Development and Contracts at Reliant, and she oversees all BD activities, and that includes contract and subcontract management, global marketing, proposal development, and customer outreach. So as you guys know, from many of you being small businesses yourselves, she's wearing multiple hats. So with no further ado, I will let Alex take the mic.
Thank you, Catherine. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, I'll try to speak up a little bit. Thank you for that. I appreciate it, and thank you all for being here. I definitely appreciate you coming and spending some time and sitting through this session. I hope I can provide some good information, some good insight, and some hopefully you walk away having learned something. So we can go ahead and get started. So business development growth strategies. The first thing I want to impart is kind of to set up the context of the presentation today. It's knowing who you are, knowing what you do well, knowing what your strengths are, being able to identify where your weaknesses are so you can kind of overcompensate for those. Understanding that you have to develop your own strategy to being successful. You can't follow someone else's plan. It's the you're not Steve Jobs, method of developing your own approach. You can't just take someone else's step-by-step process and try to make it your own. You really have to be true to yourself to be able to sustain and maintain your ability to continue to grow and to develop your own approach and style. So today we're going to talk a little bit, here's the agenda, kind of give you an overview of where we came from, what we're doing today, and how we got there, just so everyone can kind of understand the context of how we were able to go from operating out of one country, to having a footprint across 4 different continents, and almost, well, actually a little over $3 billion in backlog. So that's the general, topic of discussion. We're going to first look at an internal analysis. You have to know who you are to be able to position yourself for growth. how important customer relationships are, customer outreach. And then once you do achieve growth, how do you sustain that growth? How do you continue to manage where you are at that point? And then a little bit of a fun discussion on different geographies, different strategies, what it looks like operating in the Middle East versus what it looks like when you try to bid CONUS work. Quite a bit of difference, so we'll just kind of walk through some of those differences and have a little discussion. And then closing remarks, we will, it's a summary, if you will, of kind of some specific strategies that didn't really fit anywhere else, but things I wanted to discuss today. So, first and foremost, what I call from eating what you killed each month to over $3 billion in total contract capacity in 3 years. And this is a grassroots effort. This is not 8A dollars. We weren't some overnight, 8A success. Not that, we all love our 8A partners, but this is actually, from a company that had to develop their own strategies to be able to survive a kind of a scary situation. So if just kind of start from the beginning, our first contract was in Iraq. We aren't your typical garage door SDV, service disabled veteran and small business, meaning that, we didn't work to first you subcontract, then you grow relationships, stateside, and then you look across the pond and hope one day maybe you can expand globally. We started in Iraq, and that's different because it kind of sets up the context of our operating procedures, our culture, everything that we do is centered around a contingency, austere type environment. That's good for working internationally. It's a challenge when you start working CONUS. So we started in Iraq. We followed the troop transition over to Afghanistan around 2008. And from there, we operated, and we still operate today in Afghanistan. Around 2011, the sequestration hit. I don't know if you guys are familiar, or if you remember, I'm sure you do. Everyone was hit pretty hard by that, but particularly the international and the austere environments were hit hard. So funding dried up almost overnight, and there we were with a good amount of work. We were performing everything from containerized housing to manpower and life support and vehicle maintenance, and then all of a sudden it all kind of stopped. There was a political environment that didn't want to see a lot of dollars spent in Afghanistan at the time, and we just kind of looked around and said, oh no, where do we go from here? So we had to quickly and with a lot of hours and a lot of days try to figure out how we were going to grow in our own backyard. That was what made the most sense to us, is to try to go down the street, attend conferences, become known to our neighbors, if you will. So my point is, we were born in the global market. We did not expand out of a garage and make some big, tremendous leaps. So all of these strategies are based around kind of how we came to know federal contracting, if you will. There was no, Shipley's methodology. We didn't even know who Shipley was. It was just get the work done, try to grow, try to win work so we can get out of this, end up on the employment line side, if you will, of the picket line. So, and I meant to mention, if you guys have questions, or if you don't know something that I say, you want me to spell out an acronym, just don't, hesitate to let me know. I'd rather it be interactive and fun than, if you guys have questions, please just feel free. So starting with part one, which is what we call the internal analysis, figuring out who you are. You have to be able to define yourself, your company, so you know how you can grow. It's basically, if you've ever looked at, the questions that are asked in a business plan, if you can go through a business plan and answer those questions, where do you want to be, 1, 3, 5 years? That's really important because, especially in federal contract work, you don't know when your contracts are going to be awarded sometimes. Sometimes it is 1, 3 years out when you submit a proposal. So just identifying, today what you have to do to position for where you want to be in the out years. You have to be able to identify, do you want to remain small? Do you want to be acquired one day? What's your exit strategy, basically? What's your end game to this. Why are you doing what you're doing? You have to be able to understand that so you can structure yourself for growth. Do you want to specialize in a certain niche and just be that one professional company that everyone goes to, or do you want to generalize your services, etc.? Along with that, identifying market trends, understanding where the new technology is coming from, where it's going to be deployed. Does it impact your sector? Do you need to invest in more technology or people, or get certain individuals on staff that are going to be able to help you bridge to the next, to the next market trend? Making sure you always keep an eye on what your markets are doing. And then lastly, very important, is defining your why. So I'm kind of taking this out of a snippet from a leadership book that I read last year, and it was, if you're familiar, it's Start with Why, How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. Simon Sinek is the author. And the premise of the book is basically everyone in this room can tell me who you are, who you work for, your company's name. Hopefully everyone can tell me what you do, what services your company provides, where you're working, and what you want to do. But I don't know how many people in here can actually define why. Why is your company in business? What's the purpose for you and to work every day? And the reason why that's important, especially for business development professionals, is it gives you another way to approach customers and enter into new relationships. And I'll give you an example. So let's say we're a construction company. You go to a conference like this, there's 4,000 people, you go up to someone, you're like, we do construction and we have great past performance, we have excellent CPARs, we're ISO certified and we have bonding capacity, let's work together. Then the next construction company guy comes up right behind me, he says, we have great past performance, we have good CPARs, work with us. And so by the time you're done, you don't really know who you spoke to oftentimes. But imagine if you walked up to someone instead and you said, my name is Alex, I work for Reliant, and our company's main purpose is supporting the federal government, supporting the men and women who work on behalf of the federal government, the troops forward and rear, making sure that they have what they need to be successful in what they do. And we do that through construction, munitions response, and you give your service lines. Understanding why a company's doing what they're doing helps you feel connected to them. And we're not just out there trying to build 4 walls and pour some concrete. We're actually there for a purpose, and it's very central to who we are. Our ownership is service disabled veterans, and they want to develop a company that supports our federal government. And that makes you know that we're not just going to walk away. We're going to finish what we start. It's a bigger picture than just getting contracts. So think about why your company does what they do, and then start with that. It will help define who you are and make you feel connected to your customers. Moving on to positioning for growth. So you know who you are, you know what you want to be, you know kind of what your market trends are that you want to follow. So you have to figure out, how are you going to grow? Are you going to grow organically, which is a little bit of a slower process? You have to wait until you win some revenue. You're going to have to hire people once you win the work, and hopefully you don't abuse your current staff too much that they can maintain until you're able to grow. It's a slower process. It's less riskier, and it's something you have to have a little bit of patience for. Or are you going to try to grow through acquisition, merger, or are you going to do a combination of the two? And that's very important to understand, because it kind of sets up what you do when you're here. When you go out and try to win more work, develop customer bases, are you doing it organically? Are you talking to someone as maybe a merging partner? Are you talking to them as a prime contractor, subcontractor? And if you don't know, a lot of people probably don't know, it's important to ask your leadership, what is our strategy? What do we want to do? We need to know so that we can be successful in these types of settings. And as an owner, in a company, you need to be able to communicate that as well. Being able to walk into a room and know, I need to talk to this person, that person, this person, because we're going to go here, here, and here, much more effective than just walking around and hoping someone, takes notice. So that leads into identifying your target clients. You have to understand what you have to sell, and then who buys it. Who buys your services? Who buys your product? That's very important because you need to be able to target who you're speaking to, target where you're going to go and who you're going to market to. For example, I can tell you from experience, when I first started, I had no idea that different USACE districts and centers actually had specific things that they were buying. I didn't know that only, a few districts did construction or munitions. It's, something that you have to learn very quickly, but it makes a big impact in how you structure, your approach to strategy and growth. And then you can target them. So if you're going to do construction work and I go to construction because we're at an AEC conference, so I hope it's pretty relevant, but if you want to do construction or design work for the Air Force, it's AFSEC. You're going to follow their forecast, you're going to follow what their intended projects are and where their funding is. Which leads me into, so when and how does your target customer buy your service? And this impacts cash flow. This impacts, your conference schedules. It impacts how you're going to structure your staff to make sure that you have folks in the office when the proposals are coming and when you can leave, the office to go do business development and market involved market research. Understanding when the funding hits and how your agencies and your target customers get those dollars in-house is very important. There is actually, I don't know if you all are familiar, it's usaspending.gov, and I apologize, it's not on the slide, but usaspending.gov. I would write that down if it's not familiar to you. They actually have tools that help you examine the broader picture of federal spending, and it's called Spending Explorer within that link. And it provides you with data on agencies' total budgetary resources, dollar amounts that they have obligated or that have already been committed to be spent. So usaspending.org gives you that information for your target customers so you can understand, if you're bidding work for them, when is that work actually possibly going to be awarded? And that helps you structure when and how you're going to, be able to expect that additional growth. And then also you need to look at, do you have the capabilities to provide your customers with what they need alone? Or are you going to have to structure a teaming relationship or look at possibly a joint venture agreement? A lot of construction, or not construction, but a lot of contract vehicles right now are merging services. So you're seeing the government spending more efficiently. They want big contract vehicles with lots of services wrapped up into one, and it's unlikely that a small business is going to be able to have the capability to perform across all of the services expected. So it's important for you to look at, teaming relationships and be able to make good decisions on how to form those. As you can see, there's a picture of a cute puppy up here. So this is actually a puppy that we actually just brought in a couple months ago, and if anyone wants a new puppy, let me know. We could probably work something out. But so a lot of times it's you hear people say relationships and partnerships are like forming a marriage, but I like to think of it more as getting a new puppy, because when you enter into a marriage, if you will, two people at least have an expectation of what the behavior is supposed to look like. But when you enter into a partnerships, you can't make assumptions that your partner has that understanding. So you have to be willing to set expectations. You bring in a new puppy, everyone's all excited, and then it pees on your floor for the 10th time in a row, and you're really wondering, what you were thinking, but you're committed now. And you have to see that through. You have to develop that relationship, and you have to make sure that it's successful. Part of that is structuring, the expectation of what you expect from your partner, when do you expect it by, and how are you going to make that relationship work. obviously investing time, open communication, and nurturing that relationship is going to help it be more successful. But it really boils down to setting expectations and managing to those. And then one of the key things that really helped us grow was our ability to target and obtain multiple what we call hunting licenses. These are your MATOCs, your multiple award task order contracts, your multiple award construction contracts, your GWACs, your GSA schedules, your job order contracts, making sure that you have enough contract vehicles in-house so that you have sustained backlog, year after year ability to propose on task orders. It shrinks down the size of the competition. If you're on a contract vehicle with only 4, 6 other companies, and you can actually develop an understanding of what their strategies are, what their strengths are, and you can play to those when you go to target some of these task orders. Hunting licenses have been huge for us. It also helps a small business be able to partner with other companies because you have something to offer. You can leverage your contract vehicles so you can build more relationships. Another reason why MATOCs and MACs were so important to us is because when you're working internationally and you want to make a transition into a new market or work stateside, you don't know which agencies or which customers are going to find your past performance and your experience relevant. And so being able to go after multiple award contracts, you have a much higher chance of getting a contract, for one. And then also on a lot of the construction contracts, they do the phase 1, phase 2 approach. We love those. We absolutely love phase 1, phase 2 because it's almost a standardized proposal process, and it's limited to construction, but you can essentially have a packet that you can just resubmit with updated, past performance examples, and that will help you understand which customers find your past performance relevant. We submit phase 1 proposals all the time, and it's a win-win because if you're not successful, you can always, go back and ask for a debrief and find out what you need to do to be able to target to that customer. So we were able to identify which agencies found our past performance relevant, and there was a lot that didn't, and that was a good way for us to do that. So we were able to break into some markets and grow from there. You just need one construction contract, to use it as past performance, and it's just so important to be able to have those vehicles available to you, especially for long-term and sustaining your growth. So the next, we're going to talk about customer focus, and couldn't have a presentation without a quote from Gandhi. So we are talking, customer is the most important visitor on our premises, meaning that everything that you do is focused on the customer. You need to bring your customers in to be part of your organization as much as possible. You need to make them feel like they understand what you're doing, open communication, lots of visibility. They're why we're successful. So nurturing your customers and taking care of them is critical to continuing on with work, working through differences, overcoming challenges, being able to be successful for that customer. And that moves us into actually customer relations and the importance of outreach. So we all know who knows you is actually more important than who you know. You could have a huge Rolodex, 1,000 people on LinkedIn, but if your phone's not ringing, there's a problem. It's more about who is calling you when opportunities come up, and how do you make sure that you stay relevant. I was always told you have to send a letter to get a letter. So make those phone calls, make sure you stay on people's mind. The more you call, you might get lucky. There's several times where I've been working on something and I get a phone call and I'm like, oh yeah, they do that. And sometimes you just don't know. So picking up the phone and saying, hey, how's it going? What do you have new? Leveraging your relationships, making sure you stay relevant to the people that you know, will really build your network. So we're here at the conference. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of the conference circuit and how you can make it work for you. I remember the first conference that I ever went to. I ran in the room and I was so excited because it was the first time we were doing, U.S. focused work, and we do everything in Afghanistan. I mean, we do everything, that you can imagine. Radio towers, waste management, whole gamut, because the difficulty working internationally is actually not the work, it's the logistics. And if you understand logistics, you can do anything over there. So when I came stateside, I was like, we can literally work for every single person in this room and be everything that they need us to be. So I ran up to the table and I was like, hey, I'm Alex, and I work for Reliant, and we have contracts in Afghanistan. And they were like, oh God, who is this girl? And so they were like, well, what exactly do you do? Everything. We literally do everything. Whatever you need us to do, we do it. Let me have your card. I'll give it to our marketing person and they'll reach out to you. On to the next table. I came home with a stack of paper, just so excited, but no phone calls, no opportunities. And I thought, what happened there? Why were we not relevant? We could do everything for these companies. Why do they not need that? And stateside is quite a bit different. You actually, you have companies that do the site surveys. You have someone that does the different areas of construction, the electrical, the plumbing, and you know who you like, and you go to your trusted partners. And when someone walks in and says, we'll do whatever you need us to do, you can't do anything with that. You have to define what it is that you're selling so that they know what they're buying. And then, of course, you have to be able to know who's buying it first. So very important to define what it is that you're able to sell. Plan, obviously, for conferences, target customers, who do you want to be, where do you want to work, map out, your planned accomplishments, be relevant, only attend, only present to the customers that are receiving your information, and then of course strategize. If you're, like we were talking about earlier, if you're trying to merge, or if you're trying to grow out of the small business arena, if you're trying to stay small business, whatever your company's strategy is, bring that with you to the conference and make sure that you're actively pursuing that strategy. One of the most important topics that I find, that I want you to take away from this presentation is the fact that desks make us invisible. If you're a business development professional and you're sitting behind your desk, you can pretty much guarantee your company is not relevant. I remember one time I was sitting in my office and the CEO comes in and he says, Alex, we have a customer that is looking for a partner that does munitions response. We've worked for them before, and they came to us and, we went to them. We said, are you guys going to go after this opportunity? They said, yes, but we didn't know any service-disabled veteran and small businesses that could go after it with us. Why? Why didn't you know about us? We've talked before, we've worked together before. The point was we were stuck behind our desk writing proposals and we weren't out actively reminding our customers and our partners that we actually can do this work for you. So get out there and be relevant and be seen. The other thing I want to mention is on customer relations and forming those team relationships. Quid pro quo, making sure you have something to offer to the other companies that you want to work with. It's difficult to go up to someone and say, we want work from you, but we don't have anything to give you. It puts you at a disadvantage when you're trying to gain additional work and leverage your relationship. So making sure that you know what you have to offer those multiple award task order contracts, the vehicles that you are, the locations that you're in. When you go to partner with someone, keep it in the back of your mind, what can I offer them to make this acceptable or to excite them in pursuing this together with us. And kind of further on that topic, when you get approached by companies, whether you're a small business and you're approached by a large or vice versa, when you get approached and someone wants to team with you, it feels really good and it's exciting, but don't forget to ask, well, what else do you have for us? What can we do for you instead of just what can they do for your company? So make sure you always always ask if there's anything else out there. So you grew, you're there. So now what? You have to sustain that growth. You don't want to be one of those companies that ends up, right over the small business line and then not able to continue to grow. So many companies, that's kind of the dead zone for them. If they don't have a plan in place for what they do when they grow outside of the small business cap, it's very challenging for them to be able to continue to grow. One of the things that is very important in sustaining your growth is understanding what kind of a budget you need to continue to grow. For example, let's say you have a 30% win percentage. Well, you need to win $10 million worth of work to continue to stay on your growth pattern, pay your bills. You have to actually have a budget to bid $30 million worth of work because you're only going to win $10 million. So you can't have a budget based on what you plan to win. Your budget has to be based on what you have to go after to win what you have to win. Keeping that in mind as you plan for growth is key. And then being able to anticipate the revenue cycles, the ups and downs of the federal market, making sure that you know when you bid something, when it's going to be awarded, and how long you have to wait until you can expect those dollars in-house. Being able to obviously team strategically for growth, forming those partnerships that you can go into other areas with. One of our partnerships out of Afghanistan actually was one of the reasons why we were able to make the jump from Afghanistan into the Pacific. Because of a relationship that we had formed in Afghanistan, it opened up doors for us, in a key new target location. Finding out who your partners work with and where so that you can, leverage that a little bit. Use some of your contract vehicles, ask to be part of theirs. Really use your teaming relationships for growth. And then also you can form, look at forming your 8A mentor-protege partnerships. Look at forming those different relationships so you can continue to compete in areas that maybe you don't have an opportunity to compete in. As you grow, making the right hires is critical, because when you're a small organization and you have folks in-house that are doing the best they can, when you want to break into a new market or bridge that gap, you really need to focus on bringing folks into the company that are experienced and have the right background. They're going to be able to bring new relationships in, new partnerships. They're going to have contacts. They're going to understand operating environments, whereas you may not have previously understood an environment. I can tell you from experience that right now we're expanding across Africa, and one of our recent hires is very experienced, operating in Africa. We're setting up one of our first subcontract agreements for housing, and in our subcontract agreement it states, the housing must be furnished. And we get a quote, we think, wow, that's a great quote, no issue. Well, we let our operations guy look at it for a minute. He says, do you realize what furnished means in Africa? 4 walls. That's furnished. You have to have the context of where you're operating. So using your operations folks and the experience and the knowledge of some of those key hires can save you a lot of money down the road. Managing cash flow. So obviously, if you're winning a lot of work, you have to make sure you're winning it strategically so you're not overburdening your finance team, making sure you can continue to perform. Make sure you have lines of credit available if you need lines of credit to mobilize. Make sure you have the funds in place so that you don't fail right out the gate when you are successful winning work. So just, as a business development professional, make sure that you are in line with the strategic, vision of the company and being able to sustain that growth from a cash flow basis. And then another key thing that has actually benefited us quite a bit is establishing a vendor database. This is a pre-qualified vendor database that we put everyone through. If you expect a PO from us at any time in the future, you have to be pre-qualified. And that goes that it gets their, W-2s on file, and they have their billing address, and they have all the information that they need, insurance, all the pre-qualification documents, and the certifications have already been completed. That helps our operations team be able to quickly identify companies that can support operations. As you build and grow new contracts, you're going to need vendors, particularly if you start working in cost-plus type contract vehicles where you have to have 3 quotes. Having an active, up-to-date, available vendor database has been really crucial for us to be able to not waste time. You have a limited amount of resources. You need to quickly identify who can do the work, and if they're pre-qualified and ready to go, it has saved us a tremendous amount of time. And of course, your finance department is going to love you because they don't have to continually ask, how do we get them paid? Where's their information? What's their address? It's all right there. So here's the little look at different strategies that you come across in some of the different geographies. And this is important in a business development professional because, well, especially on the first one, the difference between working OCONUS and CONUS is being able to develop long-term strategic relationships. I remember when I first came in and we were working primarily in Afghanistan, we didn't have those strategic relationships because you basically just did the work either organically or it was whichever vendor could give you the best vehicle for the day. There wasn't any, we didn't commit to working together for strategic reasons. It was just who can get me the best vehicle that runs the most efficiently. Coming stateside, we were basically an 8-year-old company that was new to federal contracting work in the U.S. And we had to start from scratch building those relationships. And it became very apparent very quickly that companies use the same companies over and over. Once you have a good relationship established and you're able to know where those markets are and target those customers together, you can develop business development strategies, you can develop marketing material together, you can jointly go in and talk to customers and leverage both of your experiences together. And it really is a great way to make sure you have a partner you can always pick up the phone and call. That was huge for us, and so we've been fortunate enough to be able to establish some relationships and just knowing what they can do and when, and always at the end of the phone is very beneficial. Also, a big difference is specialized and defined scope. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but stateside work is very defined. You have very specific, requirements on a contract, and you basically work within the 4 corners. No more we'll move the gate over here, we'll add this, we'll take away that. The contingency type environment is very much fluid, as opposed to stateside where the customer says, just do it and we'll make you, we'll reimburse you later. And we're thinking, okay, sure, no problem. That's how we've always done it. And then all of a sudden the money's not there. And well, I didn't really mean it like that, so quite a bit different. We live and you learn. Overseas full turnkey services, like I said, it's all about logistics when you're in that environment. Then when you're looking at some of the requirements, being able to meet the different, the RCRAs and the CERCLAs, that's very critical to working in the United States, whereas that type of oversight doesn't necessarily exist internationally. You're more governed by your SOFA agreements, which is, there it is. I never have to say it. So it's your status of forces agreement, and it's basically just an agreement between a host country, another country, and the U.S., and how we are able to work together. You have to understand what the SOFA is in place in order to go into new markets internationally, much like you have to understand what are the regulations stateside that you have to follow as well. And then one of the big things internationally is payment. So you're used to the world, the wide area workflow payment, the WAWF payment system, but when you're working in international banks, sometimes it doesn't work that way. We actually just had some of our funds being withheld from us from a bank internationally, and we would say, okay, we need to get these funds back, those are our funds. They say, well, maybe if you give us the original articles of incorporation for your company, we'll be able to give you your funds. Okay, and so we kept giving them request after request, and they kept making up new excuses for why they couldn't release our funds, and finally we had to get, threatened the embassy and et cetera. So we literally walked out of the bank with duffel bags full of cash. Sometimes that happens, and you have to be prepared for that. You have to be able to mobilize that cash in large amounts of it if it comes to that. Payroll taxes, you've got different costs stateside that you have internationally. When you're working in the international arenas, sometimes you think, well, just because I don't have, I don't have to pay taxes, I'm going to save money, but you really need to understand what all the fees are, or you could get into trouble. Social security numbers, we see biometric scans internationally, being able to verify who's on site instead of, getting your brother or their cousin or their brother's cousin to come and work for you. You have to verify with some pretty stringent standards, who's actually accessing your site when you're working with local nationals or other country nationals. A big challenge for us is long-term career contracting and acquisition teams versus the rotating customer representatives internationally. So a lot of times you'll see 6-month tours, and so you're in the middle of a contract and all of a sudden your KO disappears and he's replaced by a new KO, and then it's a continually revolving door of contract representatives that you have to manage. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Sometimes you get a bad KO and okay, this guy's got 6 weeks left, we're going to get a new guy in. But at the same time, it creates other challenges. And then we also look at, stateside, you've got the Davis-Bacon Act, you have different payment requirements for construction particularly, or other service contracts. Internationally, you really have to be concerned with the CTIPs, which is the, combating trafficking in persons. There's some pretty stringent requirements on how you handle visas, how you hold on to their passports, their country's passports, etc. There's a ton of other, things, but this is kind of the ones that really stood out that can catch you off guard. And so now I want to look at closing remarks, and this is really just a summary of kind of some highlighted, some key topics that we found to be very critical to our growth. Ownership involvement is key, number one. They set the culture, they set the standards, they set the understanding of what they expect, for that company. And when you have an ownership that's involved in setting those, setting those strategies in place, it helps everyone in the company know what to expect and what to focus on. Another way that we were very successful is being extremely aggressive. So like we were talking about earlier, you actually don't know which of your qualifications are going to resonate with which customer base when you're entering into new markets and trying to break into new locations. It's very important, to establish those templates that you can just, push out over and over and over again, so that it minimizes the amount of time that you spend, but it maximizes the amount of opportunities that you have. And then, of course, similar customer bases have similar requirements. So a lot of the NAVFAC Phase 1 construction proposals are very similar. So when you see a Phase 1 come out for NAVFAC, you've got that template in place and you're ready to go. Be aggressive. It really just comes down to how many proposals can you get out, how many things can you push out so you can maximize your opportunities. Debriefs, we've talked about that a little bit, but it really does help when you're trying to grow where you can, be most relevant. And then we've fine-tuned, from all of our debriefs. We welcome negative comments. It helps us become stronger in the next go-round. When you're growing, you're going to make mistakes. When you're out in new markets, you're going to make mistakes. I can give an example of our first design-build Milcon construction contract. It's nothing like containerized housing in Afghanistan. We about drowned in paperwork. But it only happened once, and we recovered, and we finished the contract strong, and we survived with the good CPARs, but it was the initial shock of being in a new environment and not completely understanding the requirements because you don't even know what to ask when it's new. So being flexible, being able to recover, being able to correct your mistakes and learn from them, and then grow from them, will help you become stronger. Don't wait. Person next to you isn't waiting. Don't put something off for tomorrow that you should have done today. Make the phone call, send the email, make the connection. If you're not out there staying in front of your customer base, someone else is getting your opportunities. Make sure that you really structure your pursuits. So what we like to call crawl, walk, run. You have to be able to enter in slowly, understand the environment before you can really take off. You just need one contract in any new location to plant your flag and grow from there. Leverage your footprints, leverage your resources so you can grow. Obviously, relationships, we've harped on that quite a bit. Everyone understands relationships are key. Relationships will help you, break into companies. Like you're here today, you meet someone. They may not be the right person to talk to, but you have a good relationship with them that you're building. That person can introduce you to who you need to speak to within the company. Leverage those relationships. And then, of course, for all business development professionals, one key thing that is very central to me is making sure your operations and your programs understand and honor the relationships that you've established on the business development side. So making sure that those connections flow all the way through to the end game. You're not out there promising that you're gonna, partner on something with someone, and then have your operations team, pick their buddy down the street. So you have to make sure, and it's your responsibility in business development to see that through and make sure that you are honoring those relationships, because, if you don't, they're always going to remember that you promised something and didn't come through, and it's very difficult to be able to work with someone after that. And then last but not least, obviously, is CPARs. So if you're not getting your positive CPARs, it comes down to operations as well, but operations can either make or break your ability to win and to receive more work as a business development professional. You have to have the positive CPARs so that you can continue to perform and receive awards.
Okay, so I'm gonna come on down and try not to trip. And if you guys have any questions, I have the mic, so just raise your hand and we'll get going.
Thanks. Alex, that was excellent. A lot of gold in that. Tim Ashmore from Charter Contracting. When you were doing the identify yourself, get to know yourself, define yourself, did you guys, I'm curious, did you look at margin performance over clients, and what other considerations might there have been in doing so, and what was the process there?
Did you say margin? So are you saying what's the highest win percentage for different customer bases?
No, more like gross margin.
I see.
Yeah.
So when you're defining who you are and who you're going to target, I guess which customers have the highest.
How do you make the most money?
Well, that's a good question. You make the most money, from my experience, getting in and beating your own estimate. So you're in a competitive market. You have to be competitive on your pricing. It's going to come down to your strategies post-award, being able to save those dollars, especially in a firm fixed price situation. And then also you make a lot of money with some strategic partnerships. When you can get into a situation where you're receiving the sole source awards, those have higher margins than some of the other contracts out there.
More questions?
So you mentioned the pre-qualified vendor database. Is that something that you use a specialized software for? Is it something you're just doing a spreadsheet internally? Coming from a small business perspective, obviously overhead is, the goal is to decrease it as much as possible. What would be your best way to solve that problem?
We had the same issue. So we looked at lots of softwares, and unfortunately we ended up just deciding to go with an organic, an Excel spreadsheet that was we divide it by tabs and it's searchable. So we end up just using Excel for right now, but the intent is, have an Excel spreadsheet that can be migrated into an Access software if it gets to that point.
More questions? Okay, I have a question for you, Alex.
Okay.
I came from a large business. I've moved to a small business. At a large business, it seemed easier sometimes to define you are BD, you get out of the office, you are marketing, you stay in the office and assemble these proposals. And now I am in a situation where people are wearing a lot of hats, and I recognize in small businesses we're doing a lot of that. So how do you evaluate that fine line between being in the office and justifying the expense to get out of the office when sometimes it's the same people?
That's definitely a challenge. And you really have to understand your schedule. So you need to know when you expect your RFPs to come in, when you think you're going to have to be at your desk, and what your flexibility is to get out from behind your desk. In terms of dollars, we all work from the road, so trying to use the time away from the office. Sometimes you get your most work done on a plane. When it's quiet and people aren't coming in and interrupting you, you can get quite a bit done. So being able to take your work on the road when you can, but making sure that you know when you expect those big opportunities to hit, so you can make sure your resources are available.
More questions?
You mentioned budgeting your BD effort or marketing effort. With your experience, what has been your experience of how much of your revenue should you devote to budgeting for BD activities?
We are looking around 2%. Right now, we actually restructured this year. We went to different profit and loss centers regionally. So each one of our regional programs have their own budgets and revenue goals, and so each one will have their own business development and proposal budget, but it's typically around 2%.
Harish Krishnarao, T. Baker Smith. I made a mistake of coming to this session. I was not planning on coming, but I'm so glad I made it, and it was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
If I could drop the mic, I would drop the mic. More questions? Sorry.
Have you guys developed any strategies for mitigating slide as far as your revenue and cash flow go in terms of your growth?
That's
It's like the question
major
of the day,
challenge.
right? Yeah.
And you're talking about slide when the proposals don't come out when you expect them to, or awards. Yeah. So the way to make sure that you can continue to pay your bills while you're waiting for awards and growth to come through is you have to have a good base first. So we have an operating base out of Afghanistan where we know we can expect a certain amount of revenue every year, and we base our new growth, strategies on that baseline. And so other markets are more volatile and other markets aren't quite as defined as that. So you have to identify where your base is, where can you expect your money to come from, and then kind of operate within that base as your worst case scenario.
Questions? Okay, I have a question about your go, no-go process. So you said your win rate is about 30%.
Well, not ours, I'm just using it as an example.
Sure. So what is your typical go, no-go process, and how quickly do you move from RFPs out to yes, no, maybe so?
From working in a small business, it makes it quite streamlined, if you will. So our go, no-go process, we actually have a structured meeting every week, every Wednesday morning. We bring all the opportunities that have come out in the past 7 days to the table and force everyone to sit around, because the moment you don't have a required meeting, it slips to the afternoon. Let's do it in the morning. Let's talk next week. And you never really get to come together. So every Wednesday we sit down, even if we don't have anything, just to get caught up on what's currently in progress. was that, so yeah, it's a structured every single Wednesday. And then the go, no-go process itself, we have an internal, document that we use that outlines the opportunity so that everyone can be on the same page when we sit down to talk about it. And it's a decision in the room. If it's a go, we schedule a follow-on kickoff. If it's a no-go, obviously it goes away. But we force everyone, to come together every week. Otherwise, remember that one we talked about, what actually was 3 weeks ago, and now the RFP, the proposals due next week. You can't let stuff like that slide. You have to be on top of those proposals.
Questions? Making me run, Sally.
So how large is your BD and marketing team?
We just hired a new director of proposals, and before that, it was me, and we always had me and one other person. We like to have me plus 2, but it kind of varied. So it's small. I mean, it comes down to your processes and having templates in place and being able to react quickly. One of the nice things is when you are small, you know exactly where to go and what to use and how to use it, because you're the one that did the last one. But when you do grow, and we brought in the new director of proposals, and you're like, she's asking for best of breed, and she wants to see, where do you contain, all of the, your boilerplate stuff. Well, it's just the last proposal I wrote was the best one I ever wrote, so I know which one it was and where to go. But having those folder structures set up so you can actually have a template helps quite a bit to being able to crank them out.
Could not agree more. I come from a proposal background, and the easier it is to access your files, to access your boilerplate. Some people think boilerplate is a dirty word. It's not when it's your starting point. And I'm a big believer, please don't check me, that you should pretty much be able to develop a draft within like 4 days. Sometimes I get pushback on that, but it doesn't have to be great. It just has to be a starting point, because it's way easier to write from existing content than from a blank page. If you've ever been to college, you know that. Blank page hurts.
Yep.
So yeah, and I've been through the growth process in several firms now where we've redone our file structure to make things easier and more intuitive. And sometimes it hurts because nobody wants you messing with their file structure. Yep. But once you do it, everybody is like, oh, I'm on board now. That made my life better. More questions? Okay, well, I have another question then. When it comes to growing into new markets, on the topic of growth and expansion, how did you find teaming partners, and what did you have to offer when maybe it was a new to you client or market?
That was challenging, absolutely. When we were moving into a new market and we had to identify partnerships to help, substantiate our capability and be able to propose on all of the requirements, we would typically go to FBO or GovWin, and we would look for recent awardees. So who is actually working for that customer right now? Who's doing a good job? We would use that as our list, and we would just kind of, go down the list. Who knows anyone at any one of these companies? They're clearly figured it out how to work for this customer. And so we would start there and you pretty much can find someone that knows someone. So it goes back to relationships. Cold calling is very, very difficult. So really, even if it's someone that you don't expect to be part of a proposal process, get them in the room. Does your cousin, does your dad, does someone work for this company? Let's figure out how we can get in front of them.
I think we have time for one last question. So here.
Thank you. Alex, how do you deal with, as you grow and strategically and you expand, what are some of the lessons learned in terms of how in terms of scalability, how you dealt with quality and how you maintained quality as you grew?
That is definitely a challenge, and when you're growing in an owner-operator fashion, meaning that you still have a day job, but now you have more staff, it is difficult to maintain that quality, and things do slip through. But when things slip through or when things happen, an after-action report is crucial to understanding why it happened and making sure it doesn't happen again. There's only so many hours in the day, as we all know, so you try to put eyes on everything, but if something comes up that gets missed, then making sure you know why and fixing it going forward.
All right, well, it's 3:15, so we are on time, but I want to thank Alex for a fantastic presentation. And thank you guys for coming, and we'll be around if you have any questions or cards or anything like that.
Yep, if anyone wants a card, come grab it. I'm always available.